Hi guys, Fernandes Lembo, second edition of On the Grid. You know, John, this is like a foot in an old shoe. You know, it just slides right in, feels comfortable.
Like your trusty pair of jeans or something like that, yeah.
Your shoe would smell a little bit, but nevertheless, it's like we haven't missed a beat yet.
But your shoes don't stink.
My shoes don't stink. I put them outside, even drives the cats away. But you know, the season starts tonight, actually, Lakewood Ranch at Tampa Jesuit.
Right.
But just let's look back at last week, the respective games we were at.
Yeah.
I'll start off with me. I was at Palmetto versus Booker. It was a chance to see Jason Spicer replacing Jack Allison at quarterback. But really, the story of that game was, once again, Booker shooting themselves in the foot with mistakes, which Palmetto capitalized on, and quarterback Arthur Brantley, who was picked to be one of maybe the leading throwers in the area, got hit hard, dangling right shoulder, forced from the game. I talked to the AD, Phil Hellmuth, yesterday. He's questionable for their season opener at Riverview.
Right.
So if he can't go, that removes a big piece of their offense. And you were at?
Well, I was at Manatee, Armwood, but go back to your point. I think the one thing coaches want is to get out of those classics healthy.
Right.
I mean, you don't want an injury at all, but to have it in a game like that is really pretty much an exhibition game. I mean, that's tough. So hopefully he's all right and can continue to play. Yeah, I was at Manatee, Armwood. Great game. Had a regular season feel to it.
Right.
Bright House was there, so it was on TV. So it felt a little different than a kickoff classic. And Manatee, they beat Armwood. Great game. Armwood made some mistakes, a lot of penalties, a couple of bad snaps, but Manatee, to its credit, capitalized. And Manatee left Hawkins Stadium feeling pretty good about itself following that game. So.
You know, I read your story. Once again, Road Warriors. The road doesn't seem to bother them. They're on the road to Trussville.
Yep. Alabama.
Yeah. Can you break down that game? Dennis, our fearless forecaster, picked Manatee to get off the bus and whip them 42-19. What's your take on that?
And it's funny because one of the Manatee coaches on Twitter, he screen capped something, I don't know if it was a newspaper or a website wrote in Alabama that said Manatee can bring all its championships and its student band and a kitchen sink from Bradenton, and they're not beating Hewitt Trussville. Right, okay. So, you know, it should be interesting. Hewitt Trussville has a quarterback, Connor Adair. He's a transfer. He threw for 341 yards last week. They beat a team from Tennessee, so they're 1-0. Their game counted. But we'll see. These out-of-state games, always hard to pinpoint because we don't see these teams play. The stadium they play in is pretty new. It was opened in 2014, has AstroTurf. So, you know, it should be an interesting setting for Manatee, which is what you want from these out-of-state games, a different environment, something to juice up the first week of the season.
And the first week of the season, it's tough to get a gauge on any team. You can make predictions like Dennis did, but looking down the schedule, it looks like the first week of a college football season where you get cream puff. The favorite gets a cream puff.
A little bit.
A lot of these picks, there's only 3 games that Dennis picked are a touchdown or less.
Right, but there are some pretty good matchups. You got Camden County, Georgia coming to Venice. That should be interesting. The game I'll be at, Fort Myers going to Palmetto. That should be an interesting game. So it's kind of a different mix week one. You know, there are some games that look kind of one-sided and some games I think will be pretty compelling tomorrow night. You
know, I saw Palmetto. Jason Spicer's the quarterback replacing Jack Allison. They used to throw the ball down the field a lot. Spicer only attempted like 7 passes. It looked to me like more of a running quarterback than the passing quarterback. So I'd like to get your take on when you see him.
I covered them in the spring, and like Dave Marino, the coach, said, we're not going to be 35 times in the air anymore. It's going to be run the ball, and their defense, I think it's going to be their focal point this year. You know, kind of run the ball, play really good defense. That leads me into their game tomorrow night. They're playing a Fort Myers team. I was reading some Fort Myers stuff. Their defense is really good. And they have a player in Darren Grant, one of the top players in the nation. Has a lot of D1 offers. He's got an all-purpose back. So you're going to see 2 teams kind of like to run the ball and play defense tomorrow night. So I think it's going to be a pretty fun game at Harley Stadium.
I will be at Cape Coral at Sarasota. Sarasota looked pretty good in their game last week. Brian Gagg, I did a story, and I'm sophomore quarterback, threw 4 touchdown passes in the first half, finished with almost 300 yards total. I didn't realize that Cape Coral was 2-8 last year. One of their wins was Sailors, beating the Sailors in the season opener 28-21. But once again, Dennis picked Sarasota. I'll tell you, Sarasota, we haven't talked about this, in terms of who do you might think might be a sleeper team this year. You know, Sarasota had those kids transfer, but Brian Gagg looks like he could develop into the one area as one of the better quarterbacks. They could be a surprise team, and maybe even Riverview could be a surprise team with their sort of bulked up offensive line. Do you have any sort of sleeper picks out there that you might think might surprise?
I kind of like those 2 picks. I think those are interesting. Riverview especially, because they're not that 8A6 with Manatee, where it's Manatee and kind of the rest of the field. So I think Manatee is a clear-cut favorite to win that district. But the number 2 spot is kind of wide open. Last year it was Steinbrenner. So I think Riverview has a shot. The only problem with Sarasota is they're in a tough district. I mean, Braden River has a lot of guys back. Venice, a lot of guys back. Palmetto's going to be really good again. So it's kind of tough. They're going to need the ball to really bounce their way, and they need to really upset maybe two of those teams to have a shot. But I think there's definitely a team to watch this year. I kind of like the Lemon Bay Southeast this year, too, because there's no real clear-cut favorite in that one. And last year it was Lemon Bay and Southeast, so I'm curious to see how that's going to shake out.
I don't think a lot of people maybe are picking Sarasota necessarily to make the playoffs, but they've been so bad for so many. If they can somehow come out with a winning record, irrespective of making the playoffs, I think it'll be a step forward for Riles' team.
No doubt.
But when you look at the rest of the games, I mean, do any games really stand out? I'll tell you who might be a surprise team. Second year under Drew Lascari, they're never in a very powerful district. Cardinal Mooney, they're favored to beat Bishop Verot, who's friendly, not very good, 18-6 Dennis Pick. They might be a team that in that district. They made the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
They may surprise, or Southeast even.
Right. Like I mentioned, but I think Mooney, too, that's kind of a weird district.
Yeah, it is.
You know, so I think it was, a 3-team district maybe?
Right.
So if you want, 4-team, win one or two games to get in. So, I mean, they got a shot. They got Bryce Williams, who we mentioned, one of our players to watch, our 15 players to watch, has some speed. So I think so. So there's some pretty good storylines this year. You know, there's a couple of teams who I think it's going to be Venice, Braden River, and Manatee kind of in front of the pack. Not forget Charlotte, of course. I think Port Charlotte's going to be in the mix too. They had a good year last year. But then there are some teams who could surprise us, as you mentioned. Should be a fun year.
You wrote a little story graphic on maybe the top 15 players to look out for this year. We don't have time to go over 15, but maybe pick out a couple, maybe skill guys, obviously, that might really shine.
Well, curious to see what Josh Booker's going to do over at Manatee from Sarasota. That's going to be interesting. Also, too, Tariq Milton, another Manatee guy, one of the top receivers in the area. Tyrone Collins, defensive back over at Braden River. A lot of guys, I think, on that list. Should be a pretty fun year. Fred Billy over at St. Stephen's. Quarterback. Got an offer from USF after the year he had last year. In fact, they play Santa Fe Catholic next week, who beat them in the championship game last year. So he's a player to watch as well.
You know, Dennis Manfazzoli makes the picks. I'm dropping his name quite a bit. IMG is at Grayson, Georgia. Actually, Grayson may be the number one team, I think, in Georgia. He picks Grayson to beat IMG 27-21. Because with IMG, you expect them to be good, but you really don't get a handle on them.
Well, and they're playing a monstrous schedule. They do a lot of traveling. They make 2 trips to California, I think. They play some of the best teams in the country, so they really want to win a national championship. Obviously, it's a different breed of cat over there in terms of how they do things, and they're independent, but they're in the FHSA, so it's kind of different. But they're trying to win a national title, and you don't do that by playing a bunch of 4 or 5-win teams. They're trying to. It's an audacious schedule. We'll see how it works out for them. You know,
I think one of the complaints that I heard from people when IMG first started playing a schedule was like some of their teams they're playing, while not being cupcakes, they were games that you thought IMG should definitely win. Do you think maybe they're picking up their opponent's schedule? You think they're increasing the competitive factor in these games, starting off?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're doing it to silence anybody. I think they're just trying to find the best games they can find. And look, like I said, the only thing they can really play for is a national title, and that's very. It's very arguable because there's no tournament. It's, you have the best year you can, and hopefully you get the votes you need to be at top of one of those polls at the end of the year. And like I said, you do that by playing the best teams in the country.
Yeah, you're not going to do that by playing the Bayshores of the state.
Well,
no knock on Bayshore.
No, teams that win 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I mean, you got to go out and play the best team in Georgia, the best team in California. And if you beat those teams on the road, especially, you're going to get some looks.
Just an old prep note. Last night I was over at McCurdy's Comedy Club, and former Ram, former Michigan, former New York Giants center, Super Bowl winning center David Boss took part in their comedy boot camp. And last night was his Super Bowl. There were 10 people, 5 guys and a couple of women on stage for 5 minutes giving their comedy shtick.
How do you do?
I'd say there was maybe one guy that was funnier than him, but the guy is so big, I don't know whether the crowd was laughing because his jokes were funny or that he threatened to hike them between his legs if they didn't laugh at the guy. And I wish I could say a couple of his one-liners, but they were all pretty much X-rated. The pruders out there might think, what an offensive lineman he was. So David Boss may try to start a career in comedy. You never know.
And on that note,
we're running out of time here. Next week, first week of games, we'll review, look to the next week. Good to be back, John.
Very good.
For Lembo, Fernandez, on the grid. See you.